Good evening, or should I say good night, everybody. How's everybody doing? Thank you for sharing the live so quickly. We have over 200 views in the chat in just a few seconds. So thank you for sharing the live. Thank you for coming out tonight to listen to me, to hear my thoughts on different issues that are happening in St. Lucia. And I have had calls to add my voice or lend my voice and my thoughts and opinions about what's going on in St. Lucia. So thank you everyone for joining me. Those of you in the chat room, thank you so much for all the love and the good wishes. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm seeing the comments as I speak. Thank you, Grosley in the house. Thank you so much, everybody. So folks, last week we got word of the outcome of a court matter that a leader of the opposition, Alan Chastney, brought to court against the Speaker of the House on what he felt was the incorrect procedure with taking him before the Committee of Privileges, or the Privileges Committee, as I've heard the term being used in St. Lucia. So he first wrote the Speaker of the House, and the advice, well, his lawyers, I should say, the guidance given by the lawyers were completely ignored by the Speaker. Because the Speaker believes himself, and he believes and he prides himself on this, to be this legal ego. Who made him that? I'm not sure. But in his own head, he's convinced of his legal prowess and his legal knowledge. And typical of the ego and the arrogance of the character that the Speaker of the House is, instead of taking guidance from a QC, a Queen's Counsel, a Bajan Queen's Counsel, instead of taking guidance or getting his own team of lawyers to advise him, is what he did instead? He dug his heels in. That's what you call being wrong and strong. Wrong and strong. And all of this could have been avoided. All of this could have been avoided if the Speaker had only taken his time and gotten legal advice, real legal advice, not his own legal advice. He's no lawyer, but there's a saying, the biggest fool is a lawyer who represents himself, and he's not even a lawyer. But that's what he basically tried to do. He tried to give his own self legal advice about a matter that was out of his league, that he clearly needed to seek advice on. So instead of taking the guidance by Alan Chastney's lawyer, the QC, he dug his heels in and went full steam ahead. Went full steam ahead to continue on the matter. Then, of course, it was taken to court. And he lost big time. He lost big time. Folks, I want to read a couple things for you. And I want you to listen to the words of Claudius Francis, who had the audacity to come out on a press conference to try to justify his actions afterwards. Unapologetic, still arrogant, still condescending, still conceited, still egotistical, like he has not learned a thing. At this point, Claudius Francis should not even be speaking. He should be fired as Speaker of the House, because he's continuously brought the House into disrepute. This is him at his press conference.
To either of these statements that $200,000 in cost or $165,000.
So he's denying the costs associated with the legal fees for Alan Chastney, because he has to pay costs. Now, mind you, these costs are not coming from his own pocket. They're coming from the taxpayers of St. Lucia. They're coming from you. They're coming from me. They're coming from people who pay taxes in St. Lucia by whatever means. Whatever means we pay taxes in St. Lucia, with income tax, property tax, whatever measure of taxes, they are coming from the taxpayers of St. Lucia. It's not coming from his pocket. But instead of being apologetic and contrite in his response, he is trying to justify and say, listen to him.
Stand up in front of you and give a figure that was different to what was being quoted by his surrogates. So he smartly allowed his surrogates' figures to stand.
on a matter as serious as this, on a matter as serious as this, where Claudius' own arrogance and his own ego is costing taxpayers of St. Lucia. This was not a genuine error, you know. There are some errors that are genuine errors. This was nothing but ego and arrogance. And it's costing taxpayers. And instead of being contrite, he comes and talks about Alan Chastney's surrogates. This man cannot separate his role as Speaker of the House from his role as SLP hack. He cannot differentiate himself from Speaker of the House, where there's a level of composure and dignity and decorum that is required of you, and that of an SLP hack. Listen to the language he uses on such a serious matter that has to do with the business of the House of St. Lucia. Listen to his language.
Give a figure that was different to what was being quoted.
Let me go back a little bit.
So he could not, of the 11th of October, which we had already said we will not pursue, an order was given to. In his press conference, the leader of the opposition kept saying thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in costs. And I think one member of the press asked him the figure, and he says, well, it's not for him. The reason it's not for him is because the surrogates had already placed on Facebook, one of them, that $200,000 costs were to be paid. Another of his surrogates, one of his main ones, put $165,000. So he could not stand up in front of you and give a figure that was different to what was being quoted by his surrogates. So he smartly allowed his surrogate.
Either you have the answer to the question, or rightfully, like Alan Chastney said, it's not his place to answer that question. It's not his place to answer that question. That is the government's place to answer that question. Because they're the ones who are going to have to be paying. Well, ultimately, the taxpayers of St. Lucia. But if you have the answer, Claudius, answer the question. Why beat around the bush? His surrogate, his main surrogate, his this surrogate, his that surrogate. Of what relevance is that to the answer of the question? A very serious matter, like having to pay legal fees for your arrogance. As Speaker of the House, you brought the House into disrepute, and instead of being contrite and apologetic, you are playing politics and going down into the gutter. His main surrogate and his this surrogate and his that surrogate. No sense of reflection on the significance of what has just happened. No sense of reflection. Continue to be wrong, strong, and nasty. Wrong, strong, and nasty. Claudius has brought the House into the lowest of lows.
Figures to stand. There is no truth to either of these statements that $200,000 in cost or $165,000 in cost were ordered. And please remind me to come back to the $165,000, and you will see the trickery involved in that. The leader of the opposition also said that I have shown bias towards him and that his reference was political. Two things stand out. You would think that somebody who made a statement that he said is truthful would be more than happy to get an opportunity to ventilate and to prove once and for all that his nemesis is, for the last several years, is exactly what he said he was, and put a spoke finally in the wheel of Dr. Hilaire.
Folks, Claudius Francis continues not to get it. He continues not to get it. This is not about Alan Chastney not wanting to have this matter ventilated in the House, because I'm sure he does. I am sure he does, because it's not going to be any loss to him. It's going to be a loss to Ernest Hilaire and Richard Frederick. This is about the process, Claudius Francis. This is about the process. Your failure to follow the Constitution. Your failure to follow due process. You continue not to get it. And even in your response where you do not get it, you are still being political. Listen to this.
5,000, and you will see the trickery involved in that.
Listen to this again.
The leader of the opposition also said that I've shown bias towards him and that his reference was political. Two things stand out. You would think that somebody who made a statement that he said is truthful.
Okay, I'm hearing the volume is low. Okay, let me change my devices. Hold on. I'm going to pull this up from my phone instead because my iPad seems to be low. Just give me 1 second.
Could have denied his reference was political. Two things stand out.
Are you hearing better now?
You would think
Answer in
that
the
somebody
comments.
who made a statement that he said is truthful would be more than happy to get an opportunity to ventilate and to prove once and for all that his nemesis is, for the last several years, is exactly what he said he was, and put a spoke finally in the wheel of Dr. Hilaire.
Again, not answering, not understanding that this is about the process. Still not understanding why he's lost the case and why the taxpayers of St. Lucia has to pay fees, legal fees, amounting to God alone knows what. And you hear the political tone, his nemesis, referring to Ernest Hilaire as Alan Chastain's nemesis. That is irrelevant, completely irrelevant to the matter at hand. Completely irrelevant as to the matter at hand. But he cannot help himself. He cannot help himself. He has to behave like he's on the market step, not understanding that he's the Speaker of the Honorable House.
You would think he would welcome that. Instead, he has done everything not to give comfort to that statement. He also said that the role of the Speaker is to protect the minority. I would really like this, the ref people have spoke. The Speaker should allow that motion, but there's no government, because closing the debate would have majority. And so said.
He brings up an irrelevant thing. I'm not even sure what reference is that to this issue about what is happening there. It's totally irrelevant.
To be closed. After 3 said no, ceded to the motion, and there was a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister. So I don't know where. There is no bar on the matter being sent for hearing.
Folks, that was Claudius Francis, and there's so much more in what he said. There is so much more in what he said. I'm going to find the key places I need to show you. 307.
$1,000.
Okay. Let me read this article. Let me read this article for you. And this article is an opinion piece in yesterday's Voice newspaper. It reads, "For years, Claudius Francis has paraded before us lesser mortals his self-conferred credentials. His self-conferred credentials. He thinks he's a lawyer, gassed up by his Labour Party friends who will blow air up his behind and make him think he's a lawyer." Right? I saw a post back in July of last year where Arthur Neptune is saying he's a lawyer. It's calling him a lawyer. And you have Rosemary Bell Antoine, who was at the time the Dean of the Faculty of Law in Trinidad at UWI, saying yes, he's a lawyer. The man is not a lawyer. The Dean of the law campus at the University of the West Indies, who's now principal, is gassing him up and blowing air up his derriere. and saying he's a lawyer. So no wonder he thinks he's a lawyer. No wonder he thinks he doesn't have to confer with real lawyers who've actually written and passed the bar. No wonder he has made such a mess with this, because they have blown so much hot air up his behind that today he thinks he's a lawyer. For years, Claudius Francis has paraded before us lesser mortals his self-conferred credentials as a legal mind. He has strutted his stuff in the media, in both houses of our parliament, as President of the Senate and Speaker of the House of Assembly. His chairmanship on both sides has been laced with bravado and arrogance, and he has sought to display his knowledge of the law and processes of parliament. It's like Claudius Francis, from the time he came in, both when he was President of the Senate and even more so now, he's Speaker of the House. It's like a big peacock. Oh, everything is grandiose. Everything is showmanship in the House. Endless big talk to show off to his base. Endless big talk and flamboyantness and this and that and chest beating and ego strutting to show off to the Labour Party hacks that Claudius is this big man in town. I'm this big man in town. And he continues to embarrass himself in the House. He continues to embarrass himself in the House. The first instance was when he believed he had the right to withhold Alan Chastain's salary from him as leader of the opposition. Turns out he did not. He spent about 40 minutes grandstanding in the House. Grandstanding in the House about how he's going to withhold Alan Chastain's salary from him. Only to be told he doesn't have any authority to do that. But Alan Chastain, being the gentleman he is, never came back and rubbed it in his face. He never came back and rubbed it in his face. Alan Chastain is a gentleman. Because if it was me, I would be loud and proud as he was about saying he's going to withhold my salary. I'll be loud and proud about rubbing it in his face. Alan Chastain is a better person than I am. Francis was finally brought down to earth this week, suffering humiliation in the High Court over his attempt to bring opposition leader Alan Chastain before the Privileges Committee of the House to answer claims made against him by two government ministers, Ernest Hilaire and Richard Frederick. He was finally brought down to earth this week, suffering humiliation in the High Court. For a person whose behavior always tends to convey the court ruled, for a person whose behavior always tends to convey power, as he likes to have people believe he has power, the court ruled that Francis had no power, quote unquote, no power to refer to the Committee of Privileges any complaints made by a member of the House of Assembly against another member in respect of privilege or contempt. He had no power to do what he thought he had the power to do. Because Claudius Francis has come into this House and he believes that because he's a Speaker of the House, he's a law unto himself in the House. And he can usurp the rules of the House and do whatever the heck he pleases in the House. Well, he was cut down to size this last week and made to understand that there are laws of the country, and not all magistrates and not all courts will sing and dance to the beat of their drum. And he got a rude awakening last week, a long-deserved awakening. Yes, Felicia Brown, how can the chair of the Privileges Committee does not know the rules of the committee? He needs to resign. It was the ultimate rebuff for one who had always given the impression that he was schooled in the law, although possessing no qualifications, as far as anyone knew. It was also a major public embarrassment for the legal wannabe who has also been slapped with court costs said to be in 6 figures for his actions. The fact that this money will have to be paid to Chastain, whom he had shown no love For in the 18 months since the St. Lucia Labour Party has dominated the House with its numbers must be hurting Francis all the more. But few will have any sympathy for Francis, who is widely seen as a bully and an upstart, a show-off, an impressionist. This person will read my mind because that's exactly what I think of him. That is my thought exactly about Claudius Francis. This person and I share the exact same views. He's widely seen as a bully and an upstart, a show-off and an impressionist, who many say they cannot wait to see his fall. Some months ago, he was involved in another controversial decision to hold back Chasney's pay as a member of the House because of the absence from meetings. On that occasion, Francis quoted the Constitution and case law, including a Privy Council ruling to support his decision. In that particular Privileges Committee case, Francis had no opportunity to practice his legal skills, whatever he believed those to be. He was represented by real-life attorney Rene St. Rose. And speaking about Rene St. Rose, I wasn't planning to do that tonight, but there are some things that need to be said about Rene's role on the Electoral Commission. I might come to that tonight, or I'll leave it for another show. But it needs to be discussed. Rene St. Rose, a politically tainted Labour Party operative, who is given a serious role on the Electoral Commission. A commission that needs to be neutral, or at least it needs to be seen as neutral, and needs to be neutral. I mean, if I have time, I will come back to that, or I'll deal with that on another show. He was represented by real-life attorney Rene St. Rose, who agreed with lawyers representing Chasney that Francis did not have the power to refer House members to the committee to hear complaints of privilege or contempt. Ironically, Francis had previous opportunity last October to turn away his course of action when he was threatened with legal action in the courts by Chasney's attorney. That's what I said earlier. He was threatened with legal action. He could have changed course and saved the embarrassing and costly outcome of this. Ironically, Francis had previous opportunity last October to turn away from his course of action when he was threatened with legal action in the courts by Chasney's attorney if he did not indicate his intention to cancel the committee meetings that he had scheduled to hear the complaints by 2 Labour ministers. Whether Francis learns anything from this week's development is anyone's guess. He is widely known for his brazen demeanor, especially in political matters involving the Labour Party, of which he was once chairman. Readers will recall in December of 2021, Francis went into a magistrate's court in the company of Prime Minister Philip Pierre, reportedly to see that justice was done, as Philip Pierre said, in a case in which the Controller of Customs was seeking to charge Hilaire in a matter involving the illegal importation of a vehicle into St. Lucia. The case was withdrawn. Claudius Francis continues to bring disrepute to his position as Speaker of the House, and he needs to be fired. I am not asking for him to resign. I am asking for him to be fired. I am not asking for Claudius Francis to resign because he has made it clear he sees no reason for him to resign. He does not have the moral compass to resign. He does not understand. He still remains clueless about what he has done to bring disrepute to the House. I am not calling for Claudius Francis to resign. I am calling for Claudius Francis to be fired. Listen to me again. This should not be the decision of Claudius Francis. This needs to be the decision of the Prime Minister and the Governor General. Claudius Francis needs to be fired. That cannot be left up to him. If you bring disrepute to your employer, it is not up to you whether you resign or not. He needs to be fired. And he goes on in his press conference and dares Alan Chasney to bring a motion before the House. To bring a motion before the House that he should be fired. Knowing fully well his comrades, knowing fully well The balance of power lies in his favor, and knowing fully well his comrades are going to vote along party lines. So he arrogantly, again, no sense of remorse, no moral compass, he goes and he boasts and challenges Alan Chasney. Bring a motion to dismiss me in the House. He will recuse himself because he knows damn well it's not going to go anywhere in the House. But it should not be left up to his comrades. It should not be left up to him, or it should not be left up to his comrades. He needs to be fired. And if Philip Pierre, who wants to talk about doing things right, he needs to do things right and fire Claudius Francis. He needs to be fired by the Prime Minister and the Governor General. Whoever appoints him, he needs to be fired. And St. Lucians need to call for that to happen. He has brought shame and disrepute to the Honorable House. His ego, his arrogance. These are not genuine errors. These are not genuine mistakes that you could forgive. And there's contra. Oh, I made a mistake. I'm really apologetic. I didn't realize it. I'm sorry. These are major mistakes caused by arrogance and ego. So he goes to the Prime Minister into a courthouse where there's a hearing of a government minister who illegally imported a vehicle into St. Lucia. Let me rephrase that. I want to make sure my wording is correct. Who brought a vehicle into St. Lucia and still has not produced the correct documents up to a day like today. He has not produced the correct documents to show that he has ownership of said vehicle. That was the first instance. The second instance was the whole matter of Alan Chasney's salary. And after 40 minutes of grandstanding in the House, he had never come back to the House to let the House know that in fact he had no authority to do that. He has never come back to the House to say anything about that. The next instance was his bazooka statement. Again, he cannot separate his role from Speaker and role as a SLP political hack. There is no level of decorum. He doesn't even try to feign neutrality. He doesn't even try to behave objectively and with any level of neutrality. There is none. There is no confidence in him. There is no confidence in his ability to be neutral and objective in the House. And even Labour Party supporters know that. His behavior in the House is despicable. The things he allows in the House are despicable. The things he pretends not to hear in the House, like one member using obscene language in the House, is despicable. The lack of objectivity and fairness, the bias, the blatant bias. I mean, you have to be blind, deaf, and dumb for you not to see it. Going back to the article. Whether Francis learns anything from this week's development is anyone's guess. He is widely known for his brazen demeanor, especially in political matters involving the Labour Party, of which he was once chairman. Readers will recall that in December 2021, Francis went into a magistrate's court in company with Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre, reportedly to see that justice was done in a case in which the Controller of Customs was seeking to charge Hilaire in a matter involving the illegal importation of a vehicle into St. Lucia. The case was withdrawn. This time, it is Francis who's at the receiving end of court justice. Opposition leader Alan Chasney has called on him to resign as Speaker and dropped a broad hint this week that he will be prepared to table a motion of no confidence in the Speaker in the House if he fails to quit. Folks, We need to call for his resignation. Not his resignation. We need to call for his firing. We need to call for his firing. Folks, he goes on to boast. I want to find the right timestamp. I want to find the right timestamp on this. Anyway, I'll just speak to it. He goes on to talk about Alan Chasney should be happy for the opportunity to. He would have thought Alan Chasney would be happy for the opportunity to deal with his political nemesis. I want to find this for you. Just hold on one second. Just 1 second. There's something I'm looking for. Let's see if I can put my hands on it right now. Let me just find this for you. I am looking for, just give me a second, let me find this. Let me find this. So much content here. Okay, I'm gonna play you something by Richard Frederick. I want you to listen to this.
And every member,
Listen to this.
the matter has to come back to the House for debate, of which each and every member can now wash his dirty linen in the House, referring to all his previous lies before a vote is taken to refer it to the Privileges Committee. The matter has to come back to the House for debate, of which each and every member can now wash his dirty linen in the House, referring to all his previous lies before a vote is taken to refer it to the Privileges Committee. The matter has
Folks.
to come back to the House for debate.
Folks, Richard Frederick. The matter has to come back to the House for debate.
Now wash his dirty linen.
The matter has to come back to the House for debate.
Of which each and every member can now wash his dirty linen in the House.
So folks, the process, the process of going before the Special Privileges Committee, the process is that the members of the House have to vote on whether a matter goes before the Privileges Committee. Once that vote is taken, then the two parties have an opportunity to debate in the House for 20 minutes. For 20 minutes. Then it goes in camera, which means behind closed doors, which is an investigation. Basically, it's an investigation onto the matter before the Privileges Committee. A report is then tabled before the House, and the House votes on what is the outcome or based on that report. That's the process. But folks, there are no rules of the Privilege Committee. They have not been established. So even if Alan Chasney was taken before the Privileges Committee, there's going to be, he can't be charged for anything because there are no rules for him to be charged for. But furthermore, folks, But furthermore, let me tell you why I believe Alan Shastney is quite keen. Alan Shastney is quite keen for this matter going further. These guys would have you to believe Claudius Francis and Richard Frederick would have you to believe that it is better for Alan to drop this. They would have you believe it is not in his interest to go before the Privileges Committee. Like Richard Frederick saying, because dirty linen will be washed in the House. But what he's not telling you is that the dirty linen is his. What he is not telling you is that the dirty linen to be washed is his, not Alan Shastney's. It is his and Ernest Hilaire's. And when this matter is brought back to the House, when and if this matter is brought back to the House to go through the rightful process, to go before the Special Privileges Committee, trust and believe a lot of cans will be opened. A lot of cans that both Ernest Hilaire and Richard Frederick would love to leave closed will be open. Folks, Ernest Hilaire took umbrage to Alan Shastney saying he had a joint account with Walid Jufali. Folks, the evidence is there. The evidence is there, and I have seen the evidence because it has been in the public domain. That Ernest Hilaire opened with Jufali an account held in the name of the High Commission, the UK High Commission, the Signature High Commission in the UK. Two signatories, Ernest Hilaire and Walid Jufali. Outside of the Finance Act. Unknown to the Accountant General. So in other words, listen, any account opened in the name of the government of St. Lucia or any of its offices, any account opened in the name of the government of St. Lucia or any of its offices has to be approved by the Accountant General and opened by the Accountant General. So it falls under the scrutiny and the audit of the government. There is scrutiny of the account and auditing of the account by the government of St. Lucia. These guys they opened an account in the UK in the name of the St. Lucia High Commission. Two signatories, Ernest Hilaire, the High Commissioner to the UK, and Jufali. Basically an ambassador with title only because he did not go to a single meeting of the IMO where he was representing St. Lucia. Not a single meeting. We all know his sole interest in St. Lucia's diplomacy was to get diplomatic immunity because he thought diplomatic immunity would have saved him from having to pay his ex-wife half of his property. He had no interest in doing any ambassadorial work for St. Lucia. His only purpose was to buy diplomacy. But Ernest Hilaire opened an account with Jufali in the name of the government of St. Lucia, because the UK High Commission's office is the government of St. Lucia, without the approval of the Accountant General and outside of the scrutiny of the Auditor General. And that is a fact. That is a fact. But Ernest Hilaire will play on the technicality of words. He has never had a joint account with anybody. Not his wife, not his children. In truth and in fact, the account is not in his name. In truth and in fact, the account is not in his and Jufali's name. It's in the name of the government of St. Lucia. But they are the only two signatories for the account. An account that he had no permission to open. And never went into the scrutiny of the government of St. Lucia, the Accountant General and the Auditor General. If this is not a joint account, I don't know what is. If this is not a joint account, I do not know what is. If any of St. Lucia's ambassadors had done that, if Cheryl Francis was in Canada had done that, if Al Landers was in New York had done that, if any of our diplomats in our overseas offices had done that, open an account with a billionaire who bought our diplomacy outside of the scrutiny of our director of finance, of our consul general, what would you be saying? What would you be saying? This is a joint account. This is effectively a joint account. The evidence is there. So you want to take this back to the Privileges Committee for what? To open up a can of worms on yourself, Ernest Hiller? Go ahead. Go ahead. We would love to reopen that can of worms. Please go ahead. Be our guest. We would love to reopen that can of worms. And to follow the trail of where that money went in and out of that account. We would love to do that. The other matter is Richard Frederick. The other matter is Richard Frederick. Richard Frederick wants to take Alan Chasney before the Privileges Committee because Alan Chasney asked that he enjoy his 3-day visa to the US. Remember, folks, remember on that day, let me remind you, on that day, it was actually Claudius Francis, the Speaker of the House, who said that as we speak, Richard Frederick, and that's when the House started, the proceedings of the House started. As we speak, Richard Frederick's on a plane to the US to represent St. Lucia at the UN. Something to that effect. It was Claudius Francis who brought to the House the attention of that. Now we all know, all of us St. Lucians, anywhere in the world knows that Richard Frederick does not have a US visa. His diplomatic and personal visas were revoked. He has been unable to get one despite everything he has done. And he has done a lot over the years to try to get a US visa back. This government has even applied again, despite the fact that the American government has made clear in no uncertain terms that he will never get a visa back. They tried applying for a diplomatic visa for him now as he's a minister of government. The US again rejected him. So you know what these guys did? You know what these guys did? These guys applied for a UN visa for Richard Frederick. To do what? Up to now, none of us know. Up to now, none of us know why the government of St. Lucia would bring our country into further disrepute by applying for a UN persona non grata visa for Richard Frederick. The kind of visas that are only given, that are reserved basically for people who cannot get any other form of visa, but need to conduct business at the UN. Remember, the UN effectively operates like a country within the US. So people who may not have be able to come to the US otherwise, you can apply to get a special UN visa for them. Our government of St. Lucia, who knows Richard Frederick's visas, have been revoked even when he was a sitting government minister. For the UN to revoke the diplomatic visa of a sitting government visa, it has to be serious. And they know that they have tried everything for him to, he has tried everything to get his visa back. They know they have tried to apply for a diplomatic visa for him now, even as he became a minister in 2021, and he was again rejected. So why would you continue to drag St. Lucia's name by applying for a persona non grata visa for Richard Frederick? Folks, he took umbrage to Alan Chasney saying it was a 3-day visa and wishing he enjoys his 3 days in the US. He made big noise. He doesn't have a 3-day visa. He was upset. He made big noise. Very upset. He doesn't have a 3-day visa. He has his visa. He gave people the impression he got his visa back. He gave people the impression he got his US visa back. Folks, nothing can be further from the truth. Nothing can be further from the truth. Nothing can be further from the truth. As a matter of fact, listen clearly. As a matter of fact, Richard Frederick overstayed. Richard Frederick overstayed his 3-day visa by 2 days. Listen clearly to what I'm saying. I'm telling you. It is now confirmed. It is now confirmed that Richard Frederick overstayed his US visa by 2 days. And I challenge him to take Alan Chasney to the Privileges Committee. I challenge him to do that. And not only did he overstay by 2 days, the US has now told St. Lucia, never, ever, under no circumstances, ever apply for any form of visa for Richard Frederick. The US is upset with St. Lucia, pissed with St. Lucia for what happened there. Pissed. Folks, why would this government put St. Lucia in this diplomatic caution? I have no other way of putting it. Why would this government of St. Lucia put St. Lucia in this diplomatic caution? For what? For a man to just go and show he's in the US? Look, I reach. Why would you disgrace our country like that? Why would you disgrace the people of St. Lucia like that? Why would you put the people of St. Lucia who need to apply for visas in jeopardy like that? Why would you put our diplomatic relationship with the US in jeopardy like that? Why would you be so reckless and irresponsible to apply for a UN visa for somebody who had no business being at the UN? What did he go and do at the UN? He's not foreign affairs. He has no business at the UN. He's housing minister. Up to now, we cannot see anything he went into at the UN. We have not seen a single speech. We've heard nothing. All we saw was a picture with him posing by Minister Rambali in the UN. We have seen nothing. We have heard no report of what he went and did at the UN except embarrass our country and bring us further into disrepute. But I am telling you, bring Alan Chasney to the Privileges Committee because it's now been confirmed. Confirmed. That he indeed only had a 3-day visa of which he overstayed. And the US has warned St. Lucia under no uncertain terms to ever apply for a visa for him again. And you think it's Alan Chasney you're going to hurt by bringing him to the Privileges Committee? Tell me if you think it's Alan Chasney you're going to hurt. You talk about dirty linen, Richard? Dirty linen being washed in the house? We'll see whose dirty linen will be washed in the house. It's certainly an Alan Chasney. It's certainly an Alan Chasney. Because what will be under scrutiny is that visa of yours. And now confirmation is there as to exactly what happened. So I dare you, bring him before the Privileges Committee. Ernest Hilaire, I dare you, bring him before the Privileges Committee. Go through the correct process. Go through the correct process. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go right ahead. Go ahead. Bring him. Because what is going to come out is not going to be on Alan Chastney. It's going to be on you. It's going to be on you. But again, the arrogance, the egos, little men with big egos. Little men with big egos, and your egos continue to get you into trouble. Because you're not so full of yourselves. You all think you all can talk your way out of anything. You all think you're the brightest of the bright. And you all think you all can talk your way out of anything. Boastful, egotistical, arrogant men who think that they have the gift of words and they can talk their way out of anything. And they continue to put their foot in their mouth and get themselves into even more hot waters. Take them before the Privileges Committee and you will see what will happen. Two cans of worms will be opened on you all. I don't know who in their good head, who with any sense, opts to put their own self on the defensive. Who in their right mind opts to put themselves on the defensive? Who in their right mind? Especially when their government is so weak. Especially when their government is so weak and under so much pressure and has lost so much popularity. Especially when their government, you have a weakened government that won by 6,000 votes and has lost so much favor, has fallen out of favor with so many solutions. And there are people, even in their own camp, speaking out against them. Why would a government in such a precarious position choose to put itself on the defensive? It is beyond me. But go ahead, because you'll have a bunch of egos. Claudius, Richard, and Ernest, 3 egos. Go ahead. Take me for the Privileges Committee. We'll be very happy. We'll be very happy to see this play out in the court of public opinions. Because you can do whatever you want in the House with your 15-2 comrade majority. You can do whatever you want in the House with your 15-2 comrade majority. Because we don't expect you all to vote on any other way than along party lines. But let me tell you, in the court of public opinion, it's a different thing. In the People's Parliament, it will be a different thing. So take him before the courts. Take him before the Privileges Committee for the joint accounts and for the 3-day visa. And you all will see the outcome of that. Before I move on, this is what Rick Wayne says on this matter. The matter of Alan Chastney versus our singular Speaker of St. Lucia's House of Assembly has, among other encouragements, underscored the vital importance of having appropriately qualified personnel in positions of authority. This whole matter with Alan Chastney, this debacle, this embarrassment, this whole Maje Koshaw has, among other encouragements, underscored the vital importance of having appropriately qualified persons in positions of authority. I speak not only of their education, but also their temperament, their character, and their reputation. So Rick Wayne is saying they need to be qualified, but not merely by education, but by temperament, by character, and by their reputation. Over the years, our current speaker has in certain quarters been widely considered something of a legal eagle. The self-serving endorsements having effectively reinforced the notion that a speaker has better grasp of the law than do some with years of experience in the field, judges included, never mind that he himself has never attended law school. Folks, and that's what I spoke about earlier. To see lawyers, to see the dean of a law campus, the dean of the Faculty of Law, of UWI in St. Augustine, Rosemary Antoine, calling Claudius a lawyer when he's not a lawyer. Folks, this is an ultimate embarrassment and a shame to our house. And Claudius will not resign, and his comrades will not fire him. But we, the people, have to demand that he be fired. We cannot depend on him to do the right thing because these guys have no moral compass. We have to demand that he be fired. Folks, I will move on. Folks, what is happening at the NHC? What is happening at the National Housing Commission? What is happening at the NHC? Folks, I am asking you, I am asking the Prime Minister of St. Lucia to keep an eye on what is happening at NHC. Folks, I am asking us and Prime Minister Philippe Pierre, and I know that other people have asked Philippe Pierre to take note of what is happening at housing. That's what they call it, housing, NHC, housing, to take note. Because there's a lot happening at housing that should not be happening. Folks, you have a board who is basically effectively non-functional because you have a minister of government who basically runs things at housing. So the NHC, National Housing Corporation, you have a board that is non-functional because of a minister who controls, meddles everything at housing. Folks, the board is effectively not being led by the person who has been appointed to chair that board. Folks, the board is not being headed by the person who has been appointed to chair that board. And that person is Mikey Pilgrim. Folks, Mikey Pilgrim is the chair of housing, NHC. But Mikey Pilgrim has effectively been sidelined and marginalized by a minister who has done everything in his power to get rid of Mikey Pilgrim and to frustrate him into resigning. But Mikey Pilgrim refuses. Mikey Pilgrim refuses to resign, and Philippe has asked Mikey Pilgrim not to resign. Mikey Pilgrim was put there to watch Richard Frederick. Mikey Pilgrim was put there to watch Richard Frederick. But Philippe, you should not have to put Mikey Pilgrim there to watch Richard Frederick. Because you know the issues. Mikey has brought the issues to your attention and you need to deal with it. Mikey Pilgrim has brought the issues to your attention, Philippe, and you need to deal with it. You have put him there to watch Richard Frederick. He has brought the issues to your attention, Philippe. What are you doing about it now that you are aware of what is going on at housing? You have a minister who is so involved in the day-to-day operations and what goes on in the board, and you have who has sidelined and marginalized the chairman of the board, Mikey Pilgrim, because he cannot do what he wants with Mikey Pilgrim. He cannot. Mikey Pilgrim, he cannot do what he wants with him. And so he has pushed Mikey aside. We all know the turnover on the board at housing. Some months ago, we heard most of the board resigned. And you know why they resigned? They resigned by Richard Frederick's instructions because he was trying to get the board. He was trying to get the board basically dissolved. He thought when they all resigned, the board would have been dissolved. So that way he could have gotten rid of Mikey. But that did not work. Mikey Pilgrim is still the chair of the board, but he has effectively had his wings clipped. He has had his power taken away from him. And you know how he did that? You know how he did that? Because Richard controls the rest of the board. He has appointed the rest of the board. The rest of the board is appointed by him, except for the permanent secretary. The permanent secretary has a seat on the board. So you have the chairman of the board, who has basically been put there by Philippe to watch Richard Frederick. You have the permanent secretary, who basically dances to the beat of Richard Frederick's drum, just like the rest of the board. If he says jump, she'll ask him how high. I don't like to speak ill of our civil servants, but that is the reality. I'm not speaking ill of her. That is the reality. He controls the board, her included. He controls and dominates the board. What he says goes. And none of them have the balls to stand up to him, or the integrity to stand up to him, or the will to stand up to him, except Mikey Pilgrim. And there are some things Mikey Pilgrim will not do because he has integrity. There are some things he will not do because he has integrity. So folks, the account of NHC, 3 people signed checks. The chairman of the board, the managing director, and any other board member. Folks, there are a lot of things Mikey Pilgrim refuses to sign checks for. Refuses. Because his integrity will not allow him to do it. There are a lot of things Mikey Pilgrim will not sign checks for, because his integrity does not allow him to do it. You know what they have done? Do you know what they have done? Richard Frederick has gotten the board to open up a separate account. Richard Frederick has gotten the board to open up a separate account of which Mikey Pilgrim is not a signatory. Folks, are you all hearing me? So the chairman has a layer of a check and balance, another layer of scrutiny. Richard Frederick has gotten the board to open up another account of which Mikey Pilgrim is not a signatory. There are 2 signatories. The managing director, the the managing director, the permanent secretary, and John Peters, who's on the board. Are you all hearing me? Are you all hearing me? There are 3 signatories on that account. The managing director, John Peters, and the permanent secretary. Folks, Richard Frederick has effectively clipped the wings of Mikey Pilgrim and removed any level of scrutiny which he could have over the expenses of the payments of the NHC, because he refuses certain things based on his integrity. So there is no oversight from the chairman of what happens on that account. And Richard Frederick says Philippia knows what's going on in housing. Yeah, Philippia, you do know what's going on in housing because Mikey Pilgrim has brought all of it to your attention. So you talked about honesty and transparency. You talked about not accepting any level of corruption. What are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about this? You have the knowledge. It's not like you don't know. You know that this is going on. What are you going to do about this now? Folks, Richard Frederick is doing what he wants at housing. His right-hand man, Didas Fede, who does all his dirty work, Peter Wongfook Matthew, the fake profile on Facebook that insults everybody for Richard, Peter Wongfook Matthew. His lead henchman, he has now made him Chief Implementation Officer and reports directly to him. Folks, remember Didas was on the board of housing. He's now removed him to give him a paid position. Chief Implementation Officer, reporting directly to him, Richard Frederick. Can you believe what is going on at housing? And Philippia is silent. Philippia is aware. He knows. What is he going to do about this now that he knows? Folks, just in January, last month, Richard Frederick and a bunch of the board members from housing went on a joyride to Algeria. The chairman was excluded. Now Richard will tell you that Algeria paid for the trip. That is irrelevant. Who paid for the trip is irrelevant. What did you go do there, and why did you go? Why was your chairman excluded from the trip and other board members went? And we need to stop this thing about ministers of government traveling here, there, and everywhere, and there's no report to the people of St. Lucia. We need to stop this thing about ministers of government traveling here, there, and everywhere. We don't know they're going, unless probably somebody at the airport sees they're going, or somebody leaks information. And there is no report to the people of St. Lucia. In Barbados, you will never see that. When a minister of government travels, there's daily reports that come out in various means, shared on social media. You see pictures, you see who they had meetings with, you see everything. There's transparency and there's openness and there's scrutiny and there's accountability to the people. But in St. Lucia, these guys are going on a joyride everywhere. And then you hear about it, and when you challenge them, then they want to tell you, oh, I didn't pay for it. They paid for it. As if that is the issue. That is irrelevant. That is not the issue. The issue is accountability to the people. What did you go do there? You are representing us. You are going in the name of the government of St. Lucia. Who composed the delegation? And why was your chairman omitted from the delegation? Folks, I want to read something else for you. I want to read an article by Samuel Bowers for you. I want to read an article by Samuel Bowers. And remember, Samuel Bowers, right after the election, when boards were being formed, Samuel Bowers was on the board of NHC. His background is in urban housing. He has a background in housing. He's probably one of the few on the board who actually has a background in housing. But he was fired by Richard Frederick from the board because he challenged Richard that his developmental plan for housing, what his views of housing was not. Anyway, he was fired by Richard. Okay? So he continues to challenge Richard on issues of housing matters. Listen to this article by Samuel Bowers. Please reform the NHC. It is an embarrassment. There is little doubt that in the perception of many St. Lucians, the NHC is not fit for purpose, and the reality might well be the same. So he's saying that the perception is there, that it does not suit its purpose, and the reality is that that perception may likely be accurate. Given the recent history of the NHC, any government serious about the way public money and state-owned lands are spent and managed would have placed the NHC into special measures to protect public money and the reputation of public service governance and management in St. Lucia. Given the recent history of the NHC, any government serious about the way public money and state-owned lands are spent and managed would have placed the NHC into special measures, quote unquote, to protect public money and the reputation of public service governance and management in St. Lucia. Months after the SLP administration took office, the public was treated with salacious details of some 80-20 arrangements for the development of housing at Shock. These days you don't hear much about that. As a matter of fact, you hear nothing about that. When the government just came in, Richard Frederick came boasting about some housing development at Shock with an 80-20 deal. Where is that? Almost 2 years later, where is that? We don't hear anything about that. Where is that at? Where is that at? We have heard nothing in the last year and a half almost about that. Where is that project at? Where are they in the process? Next, the media was bombarded with reports of forensic audits, but 12 months later, not a word. Then there was $10 million for a housing assistance program. $10 million for a housing assistance program. But we only saw repairs to a few homes and construction of 3 huts. We only saw repairs to a few homes and construction of a few huts that the Prime Minister described as not homes for people to live in. They were only for the poorest of the poor. You all remember when Philip Pierre said that? when challenged about the huts they have built, huts that if a category 1 hurricane or a little storm passed by, they and all its occupants would have been gone with the storm. Philippia said, these are not houses for people to live in. They were for the poorest of the poor. So we saw 3 of these built and some very basic housing repairs. That's what we saw, the $10 million. We don't know what became of the big investor consultation to show off a condominium project. Remember that condominium project at Bexar? You remember all the grandiose about a housing project, a condominium project at Bexar? You all remember that? We don't know what became of the big investor consultation to show off a condominium project that the DCA regarded as too poorly planned to be granted approval. We have no idea what has become of that. I think he told us that by the end of 2022, construction would have started on those condominiums. Where is that today? We've heard nothing about it. Turmoil at the board level of NHC, with the minister issuing more directives than a traffic policeman. Turmoil at the board level of NHC, with the minister issuing more directives than a traffic policeman. How is a minister involved in the running of a board of a corporation? That is not how statutory organizations work. The minister is involved in the day-to-day operations, in the board operations of housing. That is not what it's supposed to be. But of course, he's behaving like Samuel Bauer says, more traffic directives than a policeman. As the year came to an end, it emerged that some NHC board members and the Ministry of Housing were off to Algeria. Perhaps they can tell us if this is just a joyride. Now we hear that the NHC has purchased a building, while we are yet to see a strategic plan outlining the vision, mission, and the objectives of the NHC, leaving many to think that the NHC is just the playbox of the Minister of Housing and local government. Can we afford such wasteful luxuries? Last week, Richard Peterkin asked, he wanted to know who was the lawyer that was alleged to have sold a property to the NHC, and who was the minister that the Prime Minister vowed to fire if there was any corruption involved. I hope he will live up to his tough love policy. Folks, I'm not going to keep you much longer. I know it's very late in St. Lucia. But I want you all to be aware of what is happening in St. Lucia. I want you all to keep your eyes open. And there is more to come. There is more to come. There's a CSA leadership who has been compromised by politics. Let me rephrase that. You know what? I'll leave that for later. I'll leave that one for later. But I'll come back to it. And I will come back to the matter of Renee St. Rose on the Electoral Commission. I don't want to keep people any longer. I know it's getting late. But I want y'all to keep your eyes open on what is happening at housing. And I know the minister is going to come back swinging on Thursday, as he does, and he's going to come back lying a lot on Thursday. He's going to come back lying. But I want him to know that the information is reaching us. The information is reaching us. From his very own sources. From his very own sources. So he can lie, he can come back and spin it, he can twist it any which way. The information is reaching us. And the people who are involved with housing, the people who are around housing, like Bowers and the board members, Mikey Pilgrim, etc., people are talking. People are talking. People are talking. And the same way people used to leak documents to you, there are documents that are being leaked. And your 3-day visa that you overstayed in the US, I would like you to take Alan Chastain to the Privileges Committee. Folks, what is going on in St. Lucia is not good. It is not good. It is not good. You have people struggling to make ends meet. Struggling to make ends meet. Bread has gone up. Gas prices, the Prime Minister refuses to give people a break on gas prices. You have one set of people in St. Lucia enjoying the Labour Party's victory. The victory is for a few. The majority are not sharing in that victory. They are not enjoying the victory. The victory is only for a small group of comrades who are joyriding all over the world with their delegations and their good times. They're having a good time at taxpayers' expense, while the rest of the country suffers and struggles. You have the continued underdevelopment of the South. You have projects that have stopped. You have gas prices sky high and the roads in a mess. Under the last government, the road tax was for road maintenance and road repair and construction of new roads. At least there were roads. The roads were being kept. They were being maintained. The roads were in good condition. Now you have the government who has gas prices sky high, higher than they've ever been, and the roads are an utter disaster. And listen to what the Prime Minister will say. Listen to what the Prime Minister will say. Let me find this video for you. Listen to what the Prime Minister will say about the price of gas. Listen to what he will say. Unconcerned. Total lack of concern about the legitimate cries about the price of gas. The legitimate concerns about the roads. The legitimate concerns that the gas tax is not being used to fund road repairs because the roads are in a state of disrepair. Listen to what he will say.
If they want to talk about demonstration, you understand? We talk about demonstration. You know, this country is like a delicate stage of its development. We can't allow it to go back to where it was. So when you talk about demonstration, the government will have a demonstration, Mr. Speaker. And I put you on notice for that. We'll have a demonstration. This nonsense must stop. Demonstration for gas prices. Our revenue from fuel, our fuel revenue, Mr. Speaker, is Not even half of what we're supposed to collect. We've only now, because of the price of fuel, begun to collect the 450. A 450 which he put, Mr. Speaker. And now you say you have a demonstration for gas prices. Go demonstrate. We'll never stop you. We'll never say go and demonstrate in Marsha. But I can put you on guard. We are going to have a demonstration anytime. I wouldn't say when. To bring the people on the streets to show what the people support and what the people want for the country, Mr. Speaker. And that is why we're in Parliament. For the people to hear. We come in again. If you sing, you know.
Folks, could you believe the madness? Could you believe the ludicrousy of what this Prime Minister is saying? Listen to, you have to listen to this again. Listen to this again. No, you really have to listen to this again.
If they want to talk about demonstration, you understand? We'll talk about demonstration. You know, this country is like a delicate stage of its development.
If they want to talk about demonstration, we'll talk about demonstration, because this country is at a delicate state of development. Folks, when has St. Lucia not been at a delicate stage of development? Didn't this same Philip Pierre call St. Lucians out in the middle of a pandemic? In the middle of a pandemic. On October 3rd, 2021. It's not like it was 2022. It was not like, no, actually it was 2020. A few months after the pandemic started. As soon as the state of emergency ended, as soon as he went and grabbed that opportunity to call out a demonstration in the middle of a pandemic that the world had not gotten a grasp of. There were no vaccines. There were still thousands of people dying. He called out a demonstration in the middle of a global pandemic. When Alan Chasney was trying to keep the country open and running and trying to manage people's health, lives, and to keep the country and the economy going, he called out a protest. He had no reason to call for a protest. Remember, he told us in the August of that same year that the Labour Party will be calling for a demonstration. They don't know what the demonstration is for, but there will be one. So they used the COVID legislation as an excuse for the demonstration. In the middle of a pandemic, the world did not know when they were going to get vaccines. We didn't have a grasp. We don't have a grasp on COVID yet. He called out a demonstration. And less than 2 weeks later, within the incubation period, we had community spread. For the first time, within a few days after that protest, we had community spread. We did not have community spread before that. Every single case of COVID that had come into St. Lucia had come in through people coming to the country. Right after demonstration, a few days after, less than 10 days, there was community spread. In the middle of a pandemic, But now he's talking about protests. The country's in a delicate stage of development. When have we not been in a delicate stage of development? But once you're in opposition, every single year you'll have a demonstration for one thing or the other. It is part of your strategy in opposition. Every single year. Every single year you'll call a protest when you're in opposition. But today you hear in word that the UWP might or will call out a protest against gas prices. You scared. You scared. Right away you start crying. Right away you start crying. Right away you start crying.
Demonstration. You understand? We talk about demonstration. You know, this country is like a delicate stage of its development. We can't allow it to go back to where it was. So when you talk about...
We can't allow it to go back to where it was. We would love for it to go back to where it was because it was being managed. We would love for it to go back to where it was because it was being managed.
demonstration, the government will have a demonstration, Mr. Speaker. And I put you on notice for that. We'll have a demonstration. This nonsense must stop. Demonstration for gas prices. Our revenue from fuel, our fuel revenue, Mr. Speaker, is not even half of what we're supposed to collect. We've only now, because of the price of fuel, begun to collect the 450. A 450 which he put, Mr. Speaker. And now you say you want to have a demonstration for gas prices? Go demonstrate. We'll never stop you. We'll never say go and demonstrate in Marsha. But I can put you on guard. We are going to have a demonstration.
The government will have a demonstration. Who they demonstrating against? Themselves? Philippines say they're going to have a demonstration. Eh? They're in government and they're going to have a demonstration. You ever hear Beatties? Tell me, you ever hear so much Beatties?
Anytime, I wouldn't say when, to bring the people on the streets to show what the people support and what the people want for the country.
So the people want high gas prices and mash up roads? The people want high gas prices and mash up roads. The people want to be driving on a Millennium Highway and a Cassius Grosley Highway and entering Rodney Bay on dirt roads. Tell me, Philippia, is that what the people want? Clearly, you are oblivious to the cries of the people. Clearly, you have not heard the complaints and the concerns about the prices of gas. You have not heard the cries and the pleas of people to lower the gas prices and give them a break. You have not heard people complain about having to buy parts for their vehicles. Clearly, you have not heard. You probably tone deaf and blind.
And that is why we're in Parliament. For the people to hear, we come in again. If you say, you know.
And he laughs. And he laughs. And he laughs. Folks, thank you for listening to me. Thank you for taking the time out of your Sunday. I'm going to let you go off to bed right now. Thank you so much for being in the chat. I'm going to read your comments after the live. I'm sorry I couldn't get to them while I was going on. But I'm asking you to please keep a keen and close eye on the happenings of the country, because this government is going down a path. Our speaker in the House is going on a path that is very, 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 very worrisome. And very soon, we will have to call St. Lucians out to the streets. We will have to call St. Lucians out to the streets in peaceful protest. In peaceful protest. And I will repeat the word peaceful for those of you who pretend not to understand. We will have to call St. Lucians out to the streets to indicate their disgust with how our country is being run. Folks, have a blessed night and have a wonderful week ahead. Stay safe. Stay safe. And take care of yourself and your families. Good night, St. Lucians.